Hello everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Why Traditional PAM Fails SMBs and What to Do Instead. My name is Alejandro Leal, Senior Analyst at KuppingerCole Analyst, and today we'll have two experts from the Devolutions team joining me in this conversation. Hey guys.
Hey, hello. Very excited to be here.
Thank you. Likewise. It's going to be a good and fun conversation, and you guys have a very cool setting. So maybe if you could briefly introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Max. I'm Chief Operating Officer here at Devolutions. Been around for the last 14 years now at the company.
Yeah.
So almost from the beginning.
Yeah, and I'm Yannick. I'm a Product Knowledge and Insight Analyst. I've been at Devolutions for almost 4 years now, working, then giving that insight to our internal teams about how people are using our products. So, yeah.
Awesome. Great. Well, today we're going to have a different kind of webinar. It's going to be more of a fireside chat, more of a conversation. So I would like to encourage questions from the audience at any given time. We will be happy to answer and address those. However, before we get into the topic, I will first set the stage for the first 5 to 8 minutes to provide you with all the information that we've gotten based on our latest research on PAM. And then after 5 to 8 minutes, then we will start the conversation. But before we get into that, I would like to remind the audience of just a few things. So all of you are muted centrally. There's no need to mute or unmute yourself. We will also be conducting a couple of poll questions. You will see them on the screen. And if you could answer those, that would be great. It helps us in our research. Also, if we have time at the end, we are also going to discuss the results of those polls. Questions, as I said, please be engaged with us. We're here for you. We want to talk about this topic, so just feel free to ask anything. And the recording, together with the slides, they will be available for download in the coming days. So again, the agenda, setting the stage, fireside conversation, and then at the end, if there are more questions, we will also address those. Now, here's the first poll question. You should see it on the screen. Take your time, but in the meantime, we'll be proceeding to the next slide.
All right, we're doing a head-over ticket giveaway right now. So the first 10 people, we're going to send us an email to marketing@devolutions.net. We'll receive a free ticket to go and come see us at SecIT ICE in Hanover in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly 2 weeks.
So yeah, we invite you to send us an email, marketing@devolutions.net, and then we'll send you that details. So yeah, please come and see us.
We're going to have a booth at SecIT in Hanover. We have a team there of about 4 or 5 people. And I believe the team at KuppingerCole will be joining us as well for a few sessions. So very interesting to meet you guys and connect with you in Hanover.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So now moving on, let's set the stage. So when we talk about security, I think it's something important to keep in mind that when we talk about attackers, they're not just trying to break into systems. They're trying to gain access, privileged access. That is the real prize that they're looking for. So we see it in the news. There are a lot of different threats that come from many directions. Phishing and social engineering, especially with the use of Gen AI, software vulnerabilities, malware, identity threats, insider threats, and also advanced persistent threats, usually by state-sponsored actors. So these attack vectors, they may look different, but they often share the same objective. So once an attacker gains initial foothold, the next step is always the same, to escalate privileges and to move deeper into the organization's network. So with privileged access, attackers can bypass controls, they can move laterally, they can access sensitive data and disrupt business operations. So in other words, privilege turns a small breach into a potential major incident. And this is why PAM, privilege access management, has become such a critical component in modern security strategies, because controlling privilege access means controlling what the attackers ultimately want. And yet, despite the importance of PAM, we see that many organizations, especially small and medium-sized businesses, they struggle to implement PAM. So today, we will be exploring why that gap exists and what can be done to close that gap. But first, I would like to talk a little bit about the KuppingerCole Identity Fabric. Because if the question is, how do organizations control that access effectively across today's environments, then we will see that the challenge is that modern IT environments are no longer simple or centralized. Organizations are now operating across hybrid infrastructures, cloud services, SaaS platforms, APIs, and an expanding number of human and non-human identities. So privilege access is no longer limited to a small group of admins. It can emerge anywhere in the environment and often dynamically. So this is why the KuppingerCole Identity Fabric is important, because we are looking at identity security through this lens. So the idea behind an identity fabric is to bring together different identity and access management capabilities, such as access management, PAM, IGA, KIM, into a cohesive architecture that can manage identities, entitlements, and access decisions across the entire environment. So the concept of identity fabric is not necessarily based on a single technology, tool, or cloud service, but it's more of a paradigm for architecting IAM within enterprises. So within this broader identity fabric, PAM plays a critical role, because PAM governs the most sensitive actions and resources in the system. But as the identity landscape becomes more complex and more challenging, the way PAM is delivered and implemented also needs to evolve. So to better understand PAM and how PAM is evolving, I think it's helpful to look at the maturity journey. To look PAM as a maturity journey rather than, let's say, a single product category. So at the foundational level, PAM started with core access controls like password vaulting, rotations, session recording, and audit capabilities. These controls established the basic ability to protect and monitor privileged accounts. However, in the context of the identity fabric, PAM was isolated from broader IAM strategies. The next phase introduced integration and automation, particularly as organizations moved into cloud environments. And as those environments continue to change, we then entered a third layer focused on DevOps and machine identities. And looking ahead, we're beginning to see the emergence of AI-driven and autonomous PAM, where access decisions can be enforced dynamically based on risk, behavioral analysis, and policies. But while this maturity stack reflects the direction of the market, it also highlights an important reality. And the reality is that as PAM capabilities expand and architectures become more sophisticated, the complexity of deploying and operating this system increases as well. And this is precisely where many smaller organizations start to struggle. Capabilities are expanding, and complexity is too. So we see that over the past few years, the expectations around PAM have expanded significantly. The term and meaning of privilege has also evolved. So from a security perspective, the evolution makes sense. Organizations want tighter controls over privileged actions across their cloud infrastructure, workloads, applications, machine identities. But I think here is where we see some tension emerging, because enterprise-grade PAM solutions are becoming more broad, more integrated, and more powerful. But at the same time, they're often more complex and more resource-intensive, and also slower to deploy. So for large enterprises with dedicated security teams, this trajectory, it can be manageable, and I guess it's also necessary. But for small and medium-sized businesses, it doesn't really work that well, because it widens the gap between security expectations and operational reality. So that brings us to the key question that I would like to introduce. So how can SMBs get strong privilege access control now and add advanced capabilities over time without inheriting enterprise complexity? So that brings us to the last slide, so then we can jump into the conversation. But traditional PAM solutions were not designed with SMBs in mind. The first issue is cost. So enterprise PAM platforms often come with high licensing and operational overhead that assume dedicated and big security teams that are specialized in identity. But for smaller organizations, that cost structure can quickly become very difficult to justify. The second one is complexity. Many traditional solutions are packed with features designed for large enterprises. But for small IT teams, that often results in feature overload rather than efficiency. And it requires a lot of time to configure, to maintain, and to operate, and also to learn. The other issue is architecture. So many PAM platforms are over-engineering for SMB environments. This also affects onboarding. So in many traditional PAM deployments, organizations must first perform broad account discovery, mitigate credentials, define policies, integrate multiple systems before they can even start protecting privilege accounts. So that onboarding process becomes very slow and resource intensive. And that also leads to limited support for modular or phased adoption. So organizations are expected to deploy a full platform before seeing real value, rather than, let's say, starting small and expanding over time. And finally, there's the issue of time to value. Implementation cycles can take weeks or even months, which delays security improvements, and it can also discourage adoption. So while PAM is widely recognized as essential, many SMBs delay adoption, not because they doubt its importance, but because the traditional deployment model does not really align with their operational reality. So with that in mind, I would like now to move on to the conversation. But before we get there, just one last poll question that you will see on your screen. And I'm very interested to see the results of this question. Maybe at the end, we can have a discussion about the results.
Very good intro. I mean, that's spot on. That's exactly what we're seeing in terms of adoption, in terms of, you just mentioned starting small, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess this is where I would do my first step as an SMB. And I don't know if people can see in the chat, but we do provide a starter pack for our solutions there, which allows for up to 5 users using all our solutions, including PAM, right?
Yep.
And that's exactly where we are as a company right now, saying all the enterprise grade PAM looks great when you have time, you have resources and fundings and whatever to deploy it.
Yep.
But what about the rest of us, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's exactly why we're here today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the term that we decided to choose, right, was IT-led PAM, because in small businesses, they don't have like a team of 5 IT people and then 20 security team members in offensive and defensive security. Mm-hmm. They don't have access to that. So the way that we thought about the PAM and the way that we want to approach it is, we're trying to push it to people so that IT teams can deploy it in a matter of a couple of hours, let's say, and then get quick time to value.
Exactly, and we've learned how to bring PAM to SMBs throughout the 15 years we've been around the company, starting with remote desktop manager first, and the need for PAM solutions came up from our existing customers saying, "Hey, we also need those kind of tools for our smaller organizations, and how can Devolutions help us reach that security level?"
Yeah.
So everything that we're talking about today is something that we've actually done with our customers, deployed it to our customers. So we have a very, I would say, comprehensive experience in deploying those solutions to, and by the way, SMBs can reach up to 1,000 employees, but we also serve mid-market 5,000 employees and even more than that in some cases. It's just a matter of focusing on your exact need as an IT professional, working sometimes within a team of 2 or 3 admins, having to take care of everything in those businesses. That's exactly the target we want to reach out to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, trying to implement a PAM solution with all the as we said initially, like all the features at once, it's too much. It's too much small. And people think that going manual, like privilege access, manual password rotations, is good enough. Doing all the actions manually, that's something we hear from clients when we're talking about PAM. Sometimes they're like, "Oh no, we're doing it manually, and that's good for us." But the problem is that if you need to remember it, you're eventually going to forget it.
Well, password managers were awesome 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it still has, I believe it still has its value, but as soon as you go into more of a enterprise business kind of scenario, you quickly encounter many problems with standard password managers. And that's why today, what we see to our customers is, if you're working as an IT admin, wherever you are, you should look at PAM first and then password management for all of the business users around. But for your own needs, you password managers don't need the cut anymore for IT professionals.
No, they're not enough. They don't bring enough in terms of security. But one of the angles that we also go is in terms of productivity, because most password managers are web-based. You use that through a browser extension or through an app on your phone, and then yes, you can do some interaction. But when you need to copy and paste the password, I mean, it goes beyond the point of traditional PAM features and just the basic security idea that you don't want to see the password.
Yeah, we saw here on the slide, and we will move on to the next one soon. But credential injection is very interesting for us in terms of how we deal with remote connections. Our flagship tool is called Remote Desktop Manager. It's been around for more than 15 years now, and the whole point is managing remote connections to different endpoints. And starting from that premises, that's where we started building PAM features around that. So what you're going to find out in terms of password management for when you look at our solutions is, first, we need to make sure that we have the control on the remote connections, and then we're going to inject passwords, and we're going to take care of all the approval processes into the PAM product that we use and we offer, blah, blah, blah. But the core basis of why we have the success that we have right now is mainly coming from the fact that we handle that remote connections pretty neatly.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, I don't know if that's something that you also see on your side, Alejandro, but one of the things that the privilege, right, we manage the privilege access, but like 90% of the time, those privilege accesses, there's someone logging in with those credentials to an asset to then do actions, right? 90% of the time.
Yeah.
Yes, handle you establish it at the beginning, like there are non-human identities that we need to rotate and have those. And then if we're talking about like typical IT infrastructures, you have services running some privileged accounts and stuff like that you also need to rotate. But in SMB in mind, the connecting to an asset is like 90% of the reason why you want that privileged access.
Yeah.
So that's why I think our product and the way that we decided to design it is neat, is because we merged the privileged access with the connection that you're doing.
I like
to the next slide, the IT-led PAM approach, right?
Yeah.
And why we believe this is the right way to go for our smaller organizations and IT professionals working in smaller teams.
Earlier, you talked about the IT PAM-led approach. So I would like to maybe shift gears a little bit and go to the next slide, because this IT-led approach that you talked about earlier, I think right here, sorry. I think it's interesting because, instead of starting with large security-driven platform rollouts, this approach of IT-led PAM focuses on giving the IT teams the tools that they really need, the set of capabilities that they can deploy and operate quickly without needing, let's say, a full identity security architecture from day one. So I guess the idea is to align PAM with how IT teams actually work on a daily basis. So for many admins, privilege access happens during remote sessions when they connect to servers, infrastructure, or endpoints. So integrating privilege controls directly into those workflows can make security much easier to adopt. Also, another, I guess, important element is the speed of deployment. Instead of long implementation cycles, the goal is to allow organizations to deploy and start protecting accounts within hours or days. And that leads me to the next question for you. So what does time to value realistically look like in SMB deployments compared to, let's say, enterprise implementations?
Yeah, I mean, the first metric that we take a look at on our side is how much time does it take to start importing and rotating the first credential, right? Because if you're aiming to try to rotate and implement all of the different identities that you want to manage, you're never going to do that. Like, it's too much. So the way that when we're talking about time to value is how long does it take you to implement the solution until you import the first account. And once you did the first account in the solution and you've managed your policies and everything, the rest is just repeating the same process, just importing accounts that you think are relevant, are important to target. Yeah.
So what are those first accounts? And maybe Alejandro can switch to the next slide here. How would you identify those first 5 to 10 privilege accounts that we see the most fit for going in a quickly time to value with our tools?
Yeah, there's two. I'll say there's two ways most IT teams are working is either generic service accounts or generic accounts. And if you're going with that models like the domain admin, the enterprise admin, anything that has access to anything on the domain controller is the first thing. If you're in an Azure infrastructure, it's everything that's global administrator or able to reset any passwords, and we see the other side of it where people have personal administrator accounts, like my Yannick admin account. It's those two, right? That I think bring the most value to it. I think going with a double account principle, going with my normal account and the admin account is something that's given in most businesses nowadays. And if you aim to add those to the PAM solution, it's already a huge step forward.
Yeah. So you import those, you create your vault within the PAM solution you're going to use, Devolutions or anything other else, and then you start controlling access and approve those access to these accounts, right?
Yeah, and that's another thing. Usually the approval process, something that's lengthy, takes time to review, but in a good SMB tailored solution, like the review process, you should be able to see exactly what the person is going to do or request to do with the access, and then approve it in a couple of seconds. In our solution, we send push notifications on cell phones because keep in mind that most people who are approving those requests are not always at their desk. So having them mobily is something that's really important. But yeah, it's just be efficient, but just make sure that you did your due diligence.
Well, the whole point here is, and we've established that pretty early here at Devolutions. I mean, maybe like 7 or 8 years ago when we started offering PAM solution, is we need to make sure that productivity doesn't get left behind when you start working and increasing security within your environment. So, in other words, if you want to apply those kind of tools, we need to make sure that it actually helps you being more productive, and not the other way around, where your steps make it decrease speeds in terms of how you want to actually work within your environments. And that's the whole point of having this flawless experience. When you just check out, everything's being recorded or audited if you need log reports or whatever. And we can also, as we mentioned earlier, inject credentials on your behalf, and you never get access to any kind of credentials within that scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we focus on when we're talking about IT-led PAM and SMB focused PAM is the the access to the credentials and everything. They're just, you don't want to have access to those, right? You don't want to need to copy the password and inject it into sessions. And most PAM solutions, they focus on the credentials and the security of that credentials.
Yep.
Where I think we have a good vision and a good opportunity for IT people is that we focus more on the connection where you're going to.
Yep. I would say the image that I like to give to our customers and partners and people we work with is having this sort of huge kind of key holder where someone's going to give you access to the specific endpoints you want to get to, and not having those keys into your own possessions or in your own vault. And we did some sort of a few years back, we did a video of exactly that, saying we can vault all your credentials in a very secure way, but when it's time to actually use them, you cannot just like rely on copy paste motions. You really need to get to that credential injection point, which we can allow with Remove the Step Manager.
I think the key message here is that organizations do not need to solve everything at once, but instead they can begin with a few focused, high-impact steps. But my question for you is, once those steps have been completed, how do you ensure that the company, the business can then scale and mature over time?
I mean, that's a good question. We've been talking since the beginning about core functions, core things we want to implement. It doesn't mean that everything else is just options. Some of those things are really, really important to put in place. But focus on the first thing: import them, rotate, approve. Next, add just-in-time elevation. That's one good feature that you can add. Implemented in the right way, it doesn't cause any problems, any productivity loss. So that's one thing. Session recording, auditing, and then making sure that when there's a specific action or someone accessing an asset maybe they shouldn't be accessing, you get some reporting on that. But one of the first ones is just-in-time elevation and making sure the accounts, when they're not in use, they abide by zero standing privileges.
Yeah. You might want to say a few words on that, Alejandro, as well, but we strongly believe that just-in-time should be the default way to go for admins in terms of how we handle privileged accesses. And maybe get rid of those dual accounts with the underscore Yannick account in the future. That's my 2 cents here for our audience.
Yeah, I'd say that the most practical approach is to begin with core controls, and then from there, organizations can gradually introduce more advanced capabilities such as just-in-time access, stronger policy enforcement, and even broader integration with identity and security systems. But now I would like to maybe switch to the next slide. So I guess so far, if there's one key takeaway from this discussion is that PAM for SMBs succeeds when it fits the reality of SMBs. So security control should not introduce unnecessary complexity or require long implementation cycles, but they should deliver value. They should solve the problems that those small companies need. In other words, I think effective PAM for SMBs is not about having the most complex architecture, but about introducing practical controls like the ones that we discussed in the previous slide, while keeping IT operations efficient. And I think that's the mindset behind the IT-led PAM approach that we've been talking. But how would you differentiate between, let's say, and we already briefly talked about it, but I would like to, if you could elaborate more, how do you differentiate between the essential PAM capabilities and those that may be considered to be overkill for smaller organizations?
That's a very good question. We talked about it a bit earlier now, but I mean, just from where we are, and you presented that a bit earlier into your model as well. And what we see on the market right now, especially in the SMB organizations, is people are actually looking at ways to get started into their PAM kind of journey, right?
Yep.
And from looking at the whole project and starting to look at this kind of big monster that can be the enterprise grade PAM, and there are other great products in the market for enterprise, and that's very fine. But when you start looking at those huge projects, that's where the projects tend to stall at some point because it takes a lot of resources in terms of human resources, but also in terms of financial resources. So the very first steps should be the foundation core features is the 5 or 6 months we just discussed in terms of having import those accounts, creating sort of workflow approvals, and get to that just-in-time phase at some point. That, for me, is the key of any kind of first steps into a PAM journey. I don't know if you agree or...
Oh, yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And other things that we're mentioning in the beginning that are great PAM features, like agentic AI PAM features, they're really great. But when we're talking about SMBs, these are the types of things that are overkill. They are overkill because if you don't go on the basics of the principal accounts that are critical to your business, trying to secure those is just noise.
It's just a matter of what should come first. Yeah. Before moving to that next step with non-human identities, with behavior analytics, and if you don't have those core features in place first, you're never going to be able to put that in place within the upcoming year or so, right? Yeah. And the key here is, can I deploy those solutions within a few hours or even a few days? So it doesn't take me a few weeks and months to deploy like other solutions. And so what you see is the ratio between what's my benefits in terms of what am I getting for the effort I'm putting into a solution, and that ratio should be somehow very, very lean, right? Yeah. Saying for the max benefits, I have a few hours, a few days, and I get the max benefits for my let's say SMB kind of scenario. And then once you get your feet wet, then you can start moving upwards in terms of other use cases.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Yeah, that makes sense. And I believe that we talked about it last time we spoke. I was talking to an end user organization the other day, and they told me that they see all these PAM solutions talking about NHIs, AI agents, but that's only background noise for them. They just need password rotation. So sometimes we just have to look at the basics. There are many organizations out there that are just looking for you to solve their problems. But let's now switch to the next slide. And I guess another important aspect when thinking about PAM for smaller organizations is where privilege access actually happens in daily operations. For most IT teams, PAM and I would say privileged credentials are primarily used when remotely connecting to infrastructure, whether it's the server or the network device or the cloud system. So I guess that means that the point of risk is often in the moment of a remote session is initiated. So this is where credentials are used, where privilege actions occur, and where visibility and control are most important. Would you guys like to say anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, we talked, the term we use, you're okay?
I'm good.
You're good? Okay.
I'm good.
The
difficult question.
We used was the key to the kingdom, right? It's just one privilege, one domain admin account, let's say, gets access to everything inside of the business. One domain admin privilege account gives access to everything. Mm-hmm. So if you focus on those, you limit the exposure that you have. And what we also see it in our infrastructure is that generally, when we're talking about PAM, it causes loss of productivity. Generally, in the broad sense of terms, in our solution and in SMB-focused solutions, it's actually the other way around. It makes you more productive.
Yeah, you don't have to retrieve any kind of credentials, information, IP addresses, or whatnot. And by the way, we do support more than 60 different technologies within Remote Desktop Manager in terms of connecting to different endpoints and servers and whatnot. And that's a very interesting point that we've mentioned very quickly in the beginning. But actually having a solution that support your workflow and not the other way around. So what we say is, instead of getting a solution that changes all your workflows, you should look for a solution that actually adapts your actual workflow, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, remember, IT people, 90% of the time, they connect to assets. Yeah. So if we make that easier, if you're more productive using the application, the change management phase of making sure you're using it through it and then you're not losing productivity makes it much easier when you're implementing it business.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right.
And we talked about it a bit earlier again, but PAM is necessary to protect credentials at the point of use. So again, that's exactly what the example that we gave. You can, there's scoring you can do protecting those credentials and passwords into this huge vault that can be called a enterprise grade PAM. But when the actual time to use those passwords, that's where this is a critical phase in terms of credential injection. If you gain access to this credential, even if you use password rotation at some point or whatnot, the less exposure you give to those credentials and passwords, the better is your security strategy around it.
Yeah, absolutely. And making it easier is probably the number one thing we're aiming to do. Making it easier to use. I remember back when I was working in IT before coming in here at Devolutions, let's say 8 to 10 years ago, I was implementing password solutions, and people wouldn't want to go into those password solutions because they couldn't see the value, they didn't see how it improved their day-to-day usage. It's the same idea with PAM. If you don't see how it improves how it works in the day-to-day, you're not going to use it.
Mm-hmm.
So try to make it as easy to use as possible is probably the best way to get people into it.
Yep, that's correct.
Absolutely. Now we can maybe move on to the next slide. So I guess, we've been talking a lot about how organizations can gradually have this maturity path. So we said, the foundation stage focuses on getting the basics right. So once those core controls are in place, organizations can strengthen their capabilities by adding more advanced capabilities. And this provides, let's say, greater visibility into how privilege access is actually being used. And over time, as maturity increases, organizations can move toward more advanced models, such as we discussed, just-in-time privilege elevation and zero-standing privileges, where access is granted dynamically only when needed. So I guess the key takeaway is that PAM maturity is a journey. Organizations can start with small practical foundations and then gradually expand their capabilities as their security needs and operational capacity evolve. So I would like to hear maybe some practical recommendations, or maybe you can share some examples of how you guys have helped SMBs progress in their PAM journey from the foundational level to the mature level.
Yeah, I mean, first thing we do right internally in RD is that we offer support to anyone who reach out to us, right? That's the first thing. So we get into calls with clients who are looking to have those basic features in place, and we actually go from A to Z with them. And when I say A to Z, there's also a whole bunch of things that they need to do on their own and learn the application. But we go from creating what we call the providers, and we call that connectors, creating the provider, discovering where are the accounts and where they are, and which one I want to import into the solution, and then putting in place the checkout policies and stuff like that. We accompany most, or actually anyone who reaches out to us to put those into place so that it actually goes faster for them to go into there. We always focus on the first thing: import 5-10 accounts, add them, and then we go from there. Mm-hmm. Oh, you want to be able to inject those through a secure jump host or a secure gateway? Well, we help them implement that gateway and then do that part. You want to make sure you have those password rotations, those session recording and password rotation in place? Then yeah, we add that to the other ones, and then and then afterwards we implement things like just-in-time elevation and zero-standing privileges. Once you have a proof of concept working, right? When you added those credentials, you did some connections, you see that the password rotated, then you know that it works. Then you can safely go into zero-standing privileges.
Yeah, and it's our business model is focusing on small and medium-sized businesses, and our goal is to help, or I would say, partner with as many as we can in terms of operational and in terms of features and functionalities. And the good part is there are thousands of SMBs in the market, right? So what we say here is we're going to work with you, but on your own turf, and we're going to respect the quickness or your workflows in terms of adopting those new technologies. So instead of being very pushy with our customers and different partners, we let them go as they want to at the speed they want to go, right? So it's not unusual for us to start working with a partner or customers here for a few days, putting in place what we just mentioned, and talk again with those customers in 6 months from now to move to the next step, and a year from now to move to the next step again, and 2 years from now moving to the next. We have customers here who's been around for the last 14, 15 years, just mainly because we work with them on that specific kind of pace where we respect the resources you have on within your organization.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, if it is not, if you don't see the value, if it's too rushed, if you have too much pressure, if it's too big, you're not going to do it.
Yeah,
that's as simple as that. Yeah, you're not going to do it.
Sorry about that. My point is, since we can work with thousands of customers, we have more than 1 million users within the platform right now. Mm-hmm. We have the luxury, I would say, to say, hey, if you're not ready yet within your own specific terms, we're going to move on to the next other thousands of customers we can help. So there's no rush for our customers to say, we're not going to be pushy with them in terms of, hey, can we close the deal now? Because, there's not too many there on the enterprise market. What I'm trying to say is every kind of larger accounts becomes very important for all those vendors. But for us, having access to thousands of SMBs worldwide, we're here to help businesses that are ready to get our solutions in place.
Yeah, and the other point is that when we're going with an IT-led PAM solution or a PAM focused around SMBs, is that since they're more simpler in its use, a lot of people actually do it on their own. Yeah. They don't even need our help to be able to put it. In some cases, it's self-explanatory enough that they can do it on their own.
We call this product-led. And I would, there are like dozens of vendors out there in terms of PAM, and I would pretty much say that we're one of the best in terms of self-service deploying those solutions into your infrastructure. Mainly because it's so simple and because our tools have been designed for that exact purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much, guys, for sharing those insights. I'm conscious of the time, and I already see that there's some questions in the chat. So maybe we can go to the last slide, the key takeaways. So we can conclude this by saying that PAM is recognized as essential. There's no question. But traditional enterprise solutions are complex, and they're not fitting the reality of SMB environments. Second, a more practical path, as already discussed, can start with an IT-led foundation. And third, the most effective approach is often incremental. Start by securing small set of high-risk privilege accounts, then gradually expand the scope and maturity of controls over time. Ultimately, the goal is to bridge the gap between growing security expectations and the operational constraints that many SMBs face. So that means making privilege access control simple to deploy, aligned with real IT workflows, and scalable as organizations grow. Main takeaways, guys, so we can then jump into the Q&A section.
Yeah, sure. There's a question in the chat from Max, right? Nice name, by the way.
The question is,
I'm not sure if all the audience see the actual question, so we might want to rephrase it instead of, I'm running a PAM solution. That piece of software now need access to all privileged accounts in order to rotate the credentials. This makes it extremely attractive target, especially together with a self-hosted Devolution server. So the question is, what measures are implemented in the software itself to make misuse of the PAM solution itself harder?
That's a really good question. First thing is that in the way that we architectured our PAM solution is that the privileged account that we call the provider doesn't need access to all the privileged account. It doesn't need that. It only need access to the privileged account that you want to manage. Now, it depends on which type of identities you're trying to manage. If they're in intra ID or let's say in Active Directory, if you're still on local Active Directory, you can delegate access control and then give access to that provider to only the account that should be able to manage. So that's one way that you can scope out or restrict the scope of attack that can happen in there. That's the first thing. Second thing is that the provider itself can also be part of the PAM. So if the provider itself is part of the PAM and it's able to rotate its own password, it now is less of a security liability. I mean, there's always the risk when we're talking about identities and security identities that they can be breached and used in some ways. But if you implement password rotation on those specific accounts, even for the providers, then you have a lot of liability.
Yeah, I mean, risk zero doesn't exist.
Exactly.
The point here is to have as many layers as you can to, I would say, to make sure that any attackers that comes into your infrastructure start having more and more problems doing those lateral movements that we saw at the beginning of the presentation here, where people are actually looking for a piece of the infrastructure they can work with and start moving to other larger and more important accounts. And what you want to do here is exactly adding layer of security to make sure that it becomes harder and harder to actually get those motions rolling.
There's another question in the chat. So how can PAM help manage third-party or vendor access securely?
That's a great question. And that's cool to have that question today, because this week we released a feature for contractor access, for third-party access to our solution, right? So with that, the way that we have it is that we can give access to an external contractor to your internal infrastructure securely by going through a gateway, and then have that be a privileged credential, so that it also gets rotated. They need to have an approval and do a checkout request, and you can make sure that they don't have to install any software to have access to that.
Yep.
It's all
web-based
and client-less.
Yep.
So again, similar to what I said before, if you make it easier on those contractors to access your internal infrastructure, they're going to respect the way that the controls that you put in place. So yeah, that's nice to hear that question today.
And in working with customers, there are a whole bunch of different, I would say, homemade solutions here. And that's kind of right now it's kind of the chaos in terms of third-party access and contractors. We also see terms like vendor access management, and a lot of organizations are actually relying on homemade kind of solutions where they're gonna give access to a VPN and then trying to figure out who has access to it and trying to make sense of all of those accesses. And we say we've worked on in very easy way, clientless way. You don't need to install any piece of software on your third-party access contractor, let's say.
Yep.
You just give them access to the exact endpoints they need to work with within your environment, and we're going to track everything they do in terms of accesses, and it's all being done through the Devolution PAM solution here.
Yeah, directly from the web interface.
Yeah.
That's one thing. I remember, as I said, I have some experience working in IT, right? I worked in IT for, let's say, 12 years before coming at Devolutions, and creating the VPN access and then making sure they have the right tool, the software to connect on it and everything. For contractor access, it's a pain to manage.
Yeah.
So going with the client-less approach of just going into your browser, entering the address, finding the account, clicking launch, and then everything gets automated for the user is much more practical.
We have another question from Max again. How are these external users licensed exactly like internal users? And that's a per seat or a per named account. So every contractor needs a license to be able to reach out to Devolution PAM solution. And I'm going to ask Laurence here to actually, if you want to copy paste the link to our online store here, you're going to have access to all the price lists. And it goes down to $20 a month for every contractor if you look at the remote access part of our offering. So this allows you to get access to you mentioned earlier, Devolution server from an external user using the gateway and the web app.
Yeah. And our remote access management license in that context of contractor is what allows them to be able to use those PAM credentials and then connect remotely.
So you're going to need an actual PAM license from our offering to create those accounts and to configure those accounts. But to read and have access, you just need to have this remote access management license here.
Yeah, and since I said at the beginning that we're actually getting into calls with clients and trying to help them get it installed and getting configured, if you're interested, please reach out to us, our support team, and someone will get into a call and try to get that going with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the goal here is also in terms of just to make sure that we're all people are here is in the SMB reality, you're some sort of a one-stop shop or a single vendor to manage all the different accesses makes total sense because you don't have the kind of resources the enterprise market have, and having to deal with multiple vendors, multiple solutions that don't talk or don't integrate well within each other becomes a real pain, right? So in terms of business here, what we want to achieve is can we manage the accesses within your business for business users, for external users, contractors, IT admins, privileged users, all into a single kind of platform that you can manage and have a visibility on, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's one more question before maybe we take a look at the polls and then we conclude with the rest of the slides. So the question is, how can IT teams justify the investment in PAM to the executive leadership? And I like that question because there's always this stereotype that IT teams are not very good at communicating, and especially in SMBs where budgets are constrained. In business terms, how would you justify investing in PAM?
I mean, first thing I'll say is that if the PAM solution actually saves you time, it's a no-brainer, right? If connecting to a privileged access is actually faster when going through the PAM solution as opposed to going manually and then creating the account, resetting the password, and then giving it privileges, in my mind, that's a no-brainer. We actually polled our clients, by the way. We asked them generally how many hours a week do you save using our product? And for our product, it's around 5 to 6 hours a week that an individual IT person saves using our product.
Yeah, mainly because of credential ejection, mainly because of what we mentioned earlier in terms of organizing all those connections around all those accounts. It becomes seamless for the users to actually work with those tools. So to answer your question, instead of going the security route, I would go the productivity route, saying, hey, this tool not only increases my security posture, but at the same time saves me a whole bunch of time, gives me access to give. And you can either say, you can, just like we said, we can say, I'm going to get rid of maybe 2 or 3 vendors here and go with a single platform to manage all those accesses. I would go down that route very quickly in terms of how I would pitch a solution like PAM to my board or my C-level exec or whatever. And then security comes as a major benefit of having this in place. So it's kind of a win-win for everyone, honestly.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not saying this is the right solution for all users, mainly because if you look at maybe the enterprise market, it's another story. But for the SMB market and mid market, I would go down that route very, very quickly. Yeah.
Increase productivity, increase profit. Okay, we have one more question. Maybe we can just briefly address it, and then we can just jump in and wrap it up. The question is, what is the quickest measurable win after deploying PAM?
It's being able to see what happened in the privilege session. To me, it's the auditing phase of it. When you did all your actions, you have those rotations in place. As soon as you can stop being reactive to what happens and like try to get ahead of those things, that's where you gain your win. That's where you have your first win, is when you saw what happened in a session and you were able to do it right away.
Increase visibility, increase control over what's happening within your infrastructure. I mean, that's I would say the aha moment, when you start realizing you have control of what's happening and you're not blindsided by any kind of technology or tool that you don't have good visibility on. It becomes very evident that this is the right solution that you have. Yeah.
Awesome. Maybe we can just take a look at one of the poll questions. So the question was, how mature is your organization's PAM program? 47% of the audience said we're just starting to define our PAM strategy. And only 7% said we are adopting just-in-time and risk-based privilege management. Are you surprised by that?
Nope.
Honestly, no.
Not at all.
Really.
Nope.
Nope. One thing that happens actually fairly often when we get into calls is people are reaching out to us and they're like, "We want PAM," and I say, "Okay, but what do you mean when you say you want PAM?" What they tell me is, "I don't know." Right, and it actually happens fairly often. So, in on that route, I try to explain like the best time to value to having security checklist in place, and then making sure that those things are put into place. But people don't even know where to start. Right? They don't know what it should look like.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys at KuppingerCole do an incredible job. I believe that you guys understand exactly the difference between the enterprise market and the SMB market. And when you look at different research or whatnot, you realize that by trying to promote PAM as this global solution, very complicated, complex, it kind of fails for SMB very quickly. And that's why we're at the point where people are saying, well, 7% only of the audience as just in time and place, mainly because we've bundle this feature into this incredible high-end kind of solution that doesn't make sense for them, right? So when you start looking at those core features like we just did for the past hour, you start realizing, well, maybe just in time isn't that far-fetched for my organization. So and that's the whole point of having this discussion today here. Again, is we feel and we strongly believe that SMBs are looking for those solutions, don't know where to start, and here we are with that webinar here that I assume it's going to be useful for you guys, but I mean, I'm not surprised about the results. No.
What about you, Alejandro? Are you surprised?
Not surprised at all.
Not surprised at all.
Yeah, it's always here as well. Just moving on. Just thank you so much, guys. Here's some QR codes that you can check out, and just to remind the audience, you can find more related research on our website. We will also be having the European Identity and Cloud Conference in May, taking place in Berlin. Would anyone from the Devolutions team be there?
I believe Maurice. Maurice is our head of products. He's currently in our newly launched. We've opened an office in Spain recently, and Maurice is going to be there with the team. So yeah, I'm going to be attending.
I spoke to him during my LCPAM briefing, so it would be nice to catch up with him there.
Yep.
Great. So that's all. Thank you so much, guys, for your time, for your insights. And if you're watching this and you have more questions, just reach out to the Devolutions team. They'll be happy to help.